The Senate Banking Committee just advanced the most consequential crypto bill in American history. Crypto Twitter is celebrating. Coinbase, Circle, Ripple, and Andreessen Horowitz called it an historic win. Here's what nobody is telling you. Senators Warren and Kennedy had their confrontation on camera. The clip ran everywhere. While the cameras were on their fight, 4 amendments died in that room without a single recording. The bill that survived doesn't regulate crypto. It captures it. Here's what we're going to cover. 3 things. What actually happened in that markup and why the fight you saw on camera was the distraction, not the story. What's inside the bill itself, including a provision that creates a legal path for new token sales to retail investors for the first time in American history, and why that is not the good news the industry is telling you it is. And what the ethics amendment fight tells us about whether this bill ever becomes law, including where I put the odds and what has to happen first. If you hold crypto, if you build in crypto, or if you're thinking about either, stay with me. Hit subscribe. This analysis does not exist anywhere else. Most people covering this space are not public policy economists. I am. Now, let's get forensic. Here is what was actually happening in that hearing room on May 14th. Senator Warren arrived with 44 proposed amendments. 44. Not one of them passed. The Republican majority had the votes before the first senator sat down. Senator Kennedy, the last Republican holdout, had already made his deal the night before, a fiduciary duty provision and a housing bill attached as a writer. The outcome was decided. The hearing was theater. But 4 specific amendments are worth your attention because what they were trying to fix tells you exactly what the bill doesn't do. Amendment 1. Warren proposed giving the Treasury Department explicit authority to sanction crypto mixers, the services designed to obscure transaction trails. She named Tornado Cash specifically, the mixer the Treasury sanctioned in 2022 after it was used to launder more than $7 billion, including $450 million traced to North Korean hackers. The bill as written, she argued, doesn't give Treasury the statutory authority to isolate those services. Senator Kennedy actually agreed with her on the substance. Then he voted no anyway. The amendment failed 11-13 along party lines. Amendment 2. The National Sheriff's Association, not a Democratic advocacy group, the National Sheriff's Association had backed a fix from Senator Cortez Masto to close what they described as a law enforcement loophole in the bill's treatment of decentralized platforms. Chairman Scott ruled it out of order before it reached a vote. The sheriff's concern didn't get a vote. It got a procedural ruling. Amendment 3. Senators Reid and Smith had proposed tightening the stablecoin yield language specifically to address what community banks called a deposit flight risk. That amendment was also ruled out of order. The community banks didn't get a vote either. Amendment 4. Senator Van Hollen proposed barring the president, the vice president, every member of Congress, and their families from owning, promoting, or affiliating with digital asset issuers or platforms while in office. It also failed 11-13. Every Republican voted no. Every one of them. The stated reason was jurisdiction. They said it can be added on the Senate floor. The Warren-Kennedy confrontation that ran on every crypto feed was real. It was also the least consequential thing that happened in that room. Let's look at who lost again. Treasury's work against mixers, law enforcement's work against DeFi, community banks, and any ethics. 2 of the 4 died on procedural grounds, and I want to sit with that last one for a moment because it matters whether this bill ever becomes law. We'll come back to it in Chapter 3. Now, let's look at what actually survived. Let me make the case for this section of the bill before I make the case against it, because the case for it is real. For the first time in American history, a crypto project can raise money from ordinary retail investors through a federally defined pathway. Not accredited investors only, not offshore, not in a legal gray zone where a single SEC enforcement action can wipe out your project. A legitimate, federally structured pathway. For builders, that is genuinely significant. I've done token launches. I made money in ICOs. I lost money in others, including Recoin, which turned out to be an outright fraud. So when I tell you I have concerns about how this pathway is designed, it isn't because I think tokens are bad or ICOs are inherently extractive. It's because I know how this mechanism works, and I know what happens when the incentive structure isn't constrained. The provision is called Regulation Crypto. Here is what it does. It allows a token issuer to raise up to $50 million per year for 4 years from retail investors without full SEC registration. That's up to $200 million total per project from ordinary people, under a disclosure regime the bill describes as right-sized. What that means in practice is semi-annual disclosures, not quarterly, and a certification standard that is largely issuer submitted. Now, what does it actually do to protect retail? There are a few things worth naming honestly. Issuers must confirm they have no material non-public information at the time of sale. Issuers face new custody and segregation requirements, which matters again, particularly after FTX. There are insider resale restrictions, which is a direct response to the token dump pattern. And the bill requires timely public disclosures in connection with offerings, even if the standard is lighter than a public company. Those are real protections. They're not nothing. But here's what they don't address. The ICO market didn't collapse because it lacked disclosure forms. It collapsed because the incentive structure rewarded extraction. A founding team and its VC backers take seed positions at fractions of a cent. They raise a public round at a valuation that prices in future adoption that hasn't happened yet. The insiders sell, retail holds the bag. The insider resale restrictions in this bill are a partial fix to that last step. They slow the dump. They don't change the seed pricing, they don't change the fully diluted valuation inflation, and they don't change the fundamental dynamic, which is that the people selling to you in a token launch know more about the project than you do, and their incentive is to sell at the highest possible price before the market finds a real one. Now, here is why the timing of this provision matters. The ICO market is functionally dead. I covered that in a couple of previous videos. There were 6 token launches on dedicated platforms in all of 2026 so far, versus 21 on CoinList alone in all of 2025. 85% of tracked 2025 token launches are underwater. The retail appetite that powered the 2017 and 2021 cycles has been burned down by years of exactly the extraction pattern I just described. The large VC-backed projects that sat out the worst of that collapse, the ones that raised at institutional valuations and have been waiting for a compliant exit, those projects now have a federally licensed pathway to reach retail investors at exactly the moment when every other exit route has closed. This is not a coincidence. This is the Clarity Act working as designed. The bill doesn't protect retail from the ICO mechanism, it licenses the ICO mechanism for the firms that now most need a new retail exit right now, precisely because the old one is dead. Trustless technology managed by very trusting people, regulated by the people who needed the regulation most. Now, let's talk about whether this bill ever becomes law, because there is one provision that was excluded from this bill that tells you everything about its odds on the Senate floor. Here is the number that matters: 60. The Clarity Act needs 60 votes on the Senate floor to clear a filibuster. The Republicans hold 53 seats. So the bill needs 7 Democrats to cross over. 2, Senators Also Brooks and Gallego, voted yes in committee, but both immediately said that they may not hold those voting positions on the floor vote. And every serious negotiator in Washington agrees on what unlocks them: an ethics provision. Here is what that means in plain terms. The President of the United States and his family have accumulated, by Bloomberg's estimate, at least $1.4 billion in crypto-related gains since inauguration. World Liberty Financial, meme coins, ventures tied to family members, all above board, all well reported, and all great to see if you're a crypto insider or a crypto buyer. The Clarity Act creates the regulatory framework that governs those holdings, and the bill that passed committee contains 0 enforceable restrictions on any of it. Democrats who are otherwise sympathetic to crypto regulation, including Senator Gillibrand, who helped write the Genius Act, have said publicly, no ethics provision, no floor vote. That is not a bluff. That's a vote count. So why wasn't ethics language included in committee? The stated answer is jurisdiction. The Banking Committee doesn't control ethics rules. Those get added on the floor. Republicans say, trust the process. Here is the problem with that answer. The Van Hollen Amendment that failed in committee was a direct attempt to add ethics language before the bill left the room. And it's worth looking at what it actually said because the details matter. It barred the president, the vice president, every member of Congress, and their families from owning, promoting, or affiliating with digital asset issuers or platforms while in office. Now, compare that to what currently exists. Members of Congress can trade stocks. Their spouses can trade stocks. No existing federal ethics rules cover family members' business affiliations with industries that their relatives regulate. The Van Hollen Amendment doesn't apply that existing standard to crypto. It invents a new one, stricter than anything in securities law, broader than any current conflict of interest rule, and specific to a single asset class. A provision calibrated that way isn't designed to set a standard. It's designed to set a trap. So, the red flag is not that Republicans voted it down. The red flag is that the provision was written to be unpassable. A real ethics compromise, one that applied consistent standards across asset classes and didn't reach further than existing law, might actually get Republican votes. This one was never going to. And the Democrats who wrote it knew it when they filed it. That is the red flag. Not the Warren-Kennedy theater, not the party line votes. The red flag is that the mechanism for passage requires a deal that neither side has an incentive to close. So, where do I put the odds? Prediction markets have put this at roughly 70% since the committee meeting to become law in 2026. I think that's optimistic. 70% assumes the ethics deal gets done quietly before the floor vote. It may. But the same people who said we'll fix the yield issue in the second bill delivered a yield compromise that Coinbase still can't build a product around. The same people who ruled the sheriff's amendment out of order on procedural grounds are asking Democrats to trust that ethics language will materialize later. The bill may pass. The mechanism for passage is a private deal on ethics that the White House has publicly said it won't accept in the form Democrats need. I'd put it closer to 65% against, which is a little more optimistic than I was last week. And if it fails, the provision that killed it won't be Elizabeth Warren's 44 amendments. It will be the one amendment that Republicans had every opportunity to pass and chose not to. Now, if you want to understand the mechanism behind the provision I called the most consequential in this bill, the regulation crypto pathway and what it means for anyone who holds tokens or is thinking about investing in a token launch, that's a full video and it's coming. What I can tell you now is this. The book that documents 8 years of what happened when this mechanism runs without constraint is available now. It's my book. It's The Token Trap. The link is available in the description. And the Clarity Act just licensed the trap for the next cycle. Subscribe. Hit the notification bell. This analysis doesn't exist anywhere else that I know of. I'm Dana Love, PhD, and I'll see you in the next one.